This is David Bateson, the voice of Agent 47, and you're listening to the Xbox Expansion Pass.
Welcome one, welcome all to episode 126 of the Xbox Expansion Pass, recorded on Sunday, April 10th, 2022. I am your host, Luke Lohr, the InsipidGhost. In this episode, we welcome legendary developer Lorne Lanning on to discuss his career, E3's cancellation, industry acquisitions, and his thoughts on Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus tiers. Prior to that, we'll be checking out the news in Xbox Game Pass's new family plan. Activision is upping pay for some of its workers, and Halo Infinite Season 2's impending arrival brings questions. Enjoy. Yet another week of gaming is upon us and behind us. Welcome to XEP, discussing all things in the gamerverse as they pertain to the Xbox ecosystem. And as I am wont to do each and every week, I like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made my gaming week better. And this week, the words of kindness are extended to Mr. David Whitaker, Fame 2K from Level 1 Gaming. David, one of the role models, at least for me, in the gaming industry as far as content creators go. Always positive. He's getting his flowers out there, showing up yet again over on Podcast Unlocked, a goal that I think many of us in the Xbox content creation community have, but it's all deserved. He's positive. He's good to people. He brings a lot of joy in all the places that he is. And I just really enjoy seeing him get the accolades that he deserves. So shout out to him for all the good stuff that he does. David, if you do listen to the show, man, you're a role model, and I hope to one day be like you, my friend. Guys, plenty of housekeeping to get to. I took a much needed week off last week, and I appreciate those of you bearing with me. I did, of course, record the Lorne Lanning interview. You'll be hearing a trimmed version of that here at the end, in the back half of this episode. Lorne was extremely detailed in the best ways. We got into some controversial topics. We debated some stuff. You'll hear a trimmed version of that, which is trimmed down to an hour or so, maybe a little under an hour. On this podcast. And then, of course, I'll drop the extended interview where nothing's cut out over in the YouTube's or on the YouTube channel, kind of as a dedicated solo one-off type thing. And if I need to do that with any creators going forward, I will. But it was too much for just a one podcast episode. In fact, I introduced the interview as if it would be the beginning of the episode, but we just went on for so long that you'll hear kind of a double up in this one. But it made sense. I didn't want to axe out all of his thoughts and you'll hear a few edits as you get to his interview here, but it was so detailed in his career elements that we weren't able to get to a lot of the gaming stuff that I was hoping to get to throughout. But he dropped some incredibly cool factoids about his career, about Xbox Game Pass, thoughts on E3's cancellation. And one of the interesting things is he called PlayStation Plus's deal for Oddworld Soulstorm devastating. And it's not quite what you think, but it was devastating to them in many ways. And that is really interesting, that story. I'll leave it to you, a bit of a teaser there for sure. It was also Xbox Gamer, Mr. Anubis, who requested that interview. And Anubis, I gotta tell you, in the 2 hours that he and I talked, I didn't even get to talk about Stranger's Wrath. And I'm so sorry I didn't get to your question, but I do plan on emailing Lauren and kind of getting a follow-up for your answer there. But thank you for requesting that interview, because that is what led me to his doorstep and getting to chat with him. And to anyone that is listening to XEP, if you enjoy the interviews, please point me in the direction of more people you'd like me to have on the show. No, sky's the limit, of course. Let me know big and small. One of the hardest things is actually to connect with smaller creators that I don't know that people would be interested in chatting with, because bandwidth, it's just me working here. And so let me know. Or if you're in PR and you want me to check out one of your developers, I would love to have them on. The whole goal of XEP is to expand our knowledge of the gaming industry, and I do that by talking to creators as much as I do commenting on news. And so please point me in the right directions, guys. I love that. Before we get to news as well, I gotta just check in with you guys. It's been too long. I finished Elden Ring in the time that we had off, 160 hours into that. Absolutely Love that game. I encourage you, if you're a newcomer to Souls games, check out the episode where I did kind of go into detail Elden Ring for newcomers. That episode did pretty well, and I'd love for you guys to check that one out, just as I talk about how to approach it if you're not akin to Souls games, because I was not a Souls player. This doesn't have me running to Dark Souls. This doesn't have me wanting to play Bloodborne, but 160 enjoyable hours in Elden Ring was an absolute blast, and I would love, love, love for more people to have that experience. Got a lot of achievements in the game, beat a lot of bosses, did a lot of great things. I'm a little annoyed that you have to get to 1K the game. You have to go through multiple endings. That is a bit of a turnoff. You can save scum it here and there, but that's not really my jam. It's not really how I choose to play, although no, that is not a diss to anyone, because I think if 160 hours are put in, shoot, should absolutely be able to have the 1K. To that effect, I'm hearing a lot of people, more experienced people or people that mainlined it, they're beating the game in about 60 to 70 hours, and I think even the best could do it in 30. I chose to let my time run up that high. I chose to kind of grind it, but I absolutely loved it. It was a masterpiece of a game. 100% masterpiece of a game. Plenty of flaws as well. If any of you are hearing people kind of gatekeep, well, that's just how Souls games are. No, those people are jerks. There's so much to enjoy with Elden Ring, but there are plenty of flaws in it as well. And after playing it, I needed a palate cleanser, and I got that in the form of Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, which I am giving away a copy of the game. If you like and retweet the live tweet for this episode over on Twitter, I'll enter you in to win a copy of the game for Xbox, and I'll pick that about maybe halfway Wednesday or Thursday as well. PR gave me a copy to give away, which is kind of cool because I bought the game, played it on my own money, so all these impressions are my own, and then they gave me a copy to give away, which was kind of interesting to see kind of which tier of creator I fell in for their mind. It's kind of a back end inside baseball. They will tier different content creators to get certain codes when based on availability on occasion or based on uh, kind of soft launches of the game after the fact. It's just an interesting way they do it, but certainly appreciative to be able to give back to you guys. I was planning to give one away anyway, so it's kind of a win-win for me. Maybe I'll give away two. I don't know. Comment on the episode. I'll dump in for a second on that one because I love this game. And I want to share it with you guys. It is the absolute palate cleanser I needed. It brings so much joy as a Star Wars fan. It brings so much enjoyment as a Lego fan. The game is easily the best looking Lego game, best playing Lego game, and it's just a collectathon of good times. And I'm just having a blast with it. It's the game that I can just sit and relax and play. Whereas with Elden Ring, I would be leaning forward, focusing, and so this is absolutely just a perfect game for this month. And quite simply, it is a game that I think is a game of the year contender as well, but in a very different way. Court Lalonde wrote in and asked, can a game like Lego Star Wars ever be taken seriously in a game of the year conversation? Court from the Xbox A channel, great podcast for them as well. I love this game, and I think it deserves to be considered for game of the year. But much like the Forza games, I don't think it'll get a fair shake. We tend to have this criterion approach to game of the year. Does it do something super special, and does it have this high arc or high narrative or whatnot? And that tends to push it out of the mainline game of the year discussions. Or it goes to something that's super quirky and odd, like Untitled Goose Game. And to me, that criterion approach for game of the year is ineffective at judging what a true game of the year is. But equally relevant is the fact that, like, who cares, right? Like, I know your question wasn't meant in a mean spirit, but like, I often stopped caring what a game of the year means because it just breaks down into the, well, the Metacritic is based on this, and then you get this conversation, and that, to me, this is a game of the year contender, man. I'm having an absolute blast with it. It and Elden Ring are my two favorite games this year for sure. I'm playing through it with just this amount of joy and relaxation that is special in the gaming verse, and that's a really cool vibe to have. Shout out to Dying Light 2, which I don't think makes that cut, and yet put 45 hours into that game and had a blast with it. It's the odd and funny thing about games, for sure. And I'm enjoying the conversation surrounding Godfall. Can I tell you guys that I really want to play Godfall? It's $30 right now. I want it. I want it real bad. I want it real bad, but I haven't bought it yet, and I'm probably not going to buy it. I guess I'm hoping for a Game Pass drop on that one, but I want to play Godfall. The game looks fun. It looks like a mid-6 game where you could just go and button mash and have a good time and then be done. And there are games that I like that. It's I heard the analogy from Miles Dompierre, who kind of said it's a quack down. Ha ha. Ha ha. Untitled Goose. See, okay, it's a duck, whatever. It's a Crackdown 3 effect, right? Like, it's fun to play. No masterpiece, but fun to play. And if you just want to, turn your brain off and go, it's good for that. That's what I want Godfall for, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet. But I do want to play it, do want to play it. And to anyone that's trying to diminish anyone's joy on games like that, knock it off. Knock it off. If they want to play it, let them play. Enjoy that kind of stuff. I'm interested in Godfall, I guess, is just what I'm trying to say there. But yeah, I guess that's just a good check-in on the game side for me. I've been playing Agent Intercept a bit. It's a fun indie game, kind of capturing the old spy hunter realm, and that's kind of what I've been doing, just recovering. I think it's been a difficult time at work. The school year has been real tough. This post-pandemic school year has been interesting, and then pollen season, and then just trying to. I needed to catch my breath, if that is to say, and I'm back on Cast Co-op, and I'm hoping to appear on more podcasts coming up, as a guest, because I think we're kind of arriving into the time of the year where I can do that again. I took some time off from jumping onto other people's shows, and I'm ready to go back. So if you need a voice in the Xbox or gaming community, give me a shout. And if you want to help me appear on other shows, give them a drop a word in their ear, drop an ear. Oh, look at that. Yeah, let them know. I would love to appear on more shows now. I'm in the zone, I guess you might say. Well, let's get to the news. Game Pass is creating a family plan. This comes from Jez Corden, who had credible sources, multiple outlets, and then jumped on his reporting to kind of justify that they had their own sources as well. A family plan option is coming to Xbox Game Pass for 5 players and will likely be priced cheaper than the cost for having separate accounts. Microsoft is reportedly set to incorporate its family account system, which it already uses for its Microsoft 365 subscriptions. 5 players will reportedly be able to access the Game Pass plan, but it is unclear whether separate family subscriptions for Xbox Game Pass, PC Game Pass, or Ultimate versions of the service will go through. And they've been working on ways to distribute royalties for third-party publishers and license out elements of the Game Pass plan to make sure that those developers are not shortchanged. Now, this to me is a fantastic move. I don't think it's one that could have happened in 2017 when it was first announced. I know Todd Oxtra often writes in asking for some level or version of a family plan of Xbox Live Gold or Game Pass. This to me is not something they could have done right away, but it's absolutely the right move now when they are arriving on the doorstep of this Activision deal going through, when they're set to have at the moment over 20 studios, and then next to over 30 studios when Activision Blizzard's thing goes through. This is absolutely the way to go. This allows family members to build relationships with the Xbox ecosystem and to build out achievements and saves, and likely want to stick with games longer in that Xbox login realm for a cheaper price for parents to get in. This is what's likely going to build customers for years on end, which is fantastic. I think it's a very good thing. It's not officially announced at this point, and I would expect that you hear this at some sort of summer announcement. We know E3 is no longer going to be having a show this year, but we also know that E3 has long been on decline, and with Summer Games Fest and the Microsoft element of wanting to have a summer show being a regular thing, it would make sense that they would announce it at one of their shows. I don't know if they would do this in a spring announcement. We know there was going to be an April showing, and last I heard that was bumped to May, and that's about a month and a half old when I heard that. So I've heard nothing new on that front. Maybe we hear something about this family plan in May, but this could equally be a relevant kind of Summer Games Fest announcement. Hey, you got a family plan? Let's bring them in. Let's jump in there. And let your kids, and you can game share with people, your cousins. It doesn't need to be in the same household. Reportedly, it can be kind of across the country within the Xbox ecosystem, which is interesting. I love that. I just want more people to get to play games, and that it would accompany the reported news that Xbox Series S and X's are now more widely available than ever before. We know that they've been selling out countrywide and worldwide, with regularity, but now they're staying in stock at digital retailers for days on end. And I've heard kind of mixed discourse on that. Some saying, "Oh, is this a bad sign for Xbox?" Or does this mean people aren't interested in purchasing it? And I would actually push back on that a little bit. I understand the argument; it's a logical argument, but when you couple it with the news that how much Microsoft invested in chips and silicon and a number of the resources necessary to build consoles just prior to and after the pandemic started, it makes sense that now is the timeline they would become more available. Couple that also with the news that worldwide shipping is stabilizing a bit, and people that are kind of getting their shipments stuck in ports have now found comfortable workarounds. This is a good thing. Xboxes are now more available, and you want more people to play within your ecosystem. To me, this is a wonderful bit of news that people are able to jump in and purchase and check things out as they like. It couples very well with the family plan news. It couples very well with a number of the games that are set to release through the rest of this year, through the third-party deals that are going to Game Pass, the news that we're getting, like games like Guardians of the Galaxy, which I was high on, but not as high as everybody else. The game had a lukewarm launch, which is a bummer for such a high quality game. Apparently, according to Square Enix, it's finding new life in Game Pass. That's fantastic. I love hearing stuff like that. So more Xboxes being available, family plans becoming available reportedly very soon for people to create saves and build their own story within a legacy of achievements and game saves. This is fantastic. Um, while tangentially related, having the Series S downstairs in my house has allowed me to game more and gamed in a more relaxed fashion. I'll play Lego Star Wars upstairs when my wife wants the TV downstairs, or if I want to play on my OLED, which is upstairs. But then if I'm downstairs and just hanging out and she's reading a book or doing some work with her headphones on, I'll just hang out in the same room and I can jump back and forth between systems and not having to carry a memory card or not having to worry about anything because of cloud saving. It's just a real joy, and it brings an ease to gaming that has never been there before. And while you've been able to do that for some time, I'd not experienced it. And it just reminds me yet again the ease and comfort that I have gaming kind of in the Xbox realms and platforms. And cloud saves are just fantastic. And when you have something like a family plan that lets you build those saves and they stay there forever and you never lose it, it's like, oh, I can step out of the ecosystem for a bit and then step back in later on. And it really lends comfortable thought processes to where if you've got multiple systems from multiple manufacturers, if you got a PS5, you got a Switch, and you want to jump ship and play games on there for a little while and then come back, your saves are still there. You didn't have to worry about sell if you sold the hardware, your account is still there. If you log in via cloud, it's still there. It's a really nice kind of, I think, comfort level to have with the ecosystem. And I would imagine we see that happening more and more, but we don't hear about it as much because it's just those nice quality of life elements, which is really cool. Speaking of quality of life, Activision is set to up pay for a number of its workers. Activision Blizzard told staff that it would be upping their pay for roughly 1,100 quality assurance testers. They'd be converted over to full-time and bumped to at least $20 an hour. This, of course, coming on the back of a number of different elements of worker activism with people at Raven Software and a number of the developers around Call of Duty getting laid off or going on strike in protest of their working conditions. They created a union called the Game Workers Alliance, something that Jason Schreier is very commonly reporting on, and it was he that broke this story. We know Epic Games did something similar with their studios and their QA people several months back. This is a good sign, I think, particularly given that Microsoft is set to acquire Activision when that deal does go through. Microsoft has publicly stated that they would not be interfering or pushing back on any type of unionization, and that they want their studios to have that healthy relationship within them. To me, this is a very good thing. Oddly, Lorne Lanning talked a bit about this in his studio about how uh, Microsoft is letting people be happy as they create games, and that is then going to help create better products. And so you'll hear what he had to say on that one as well. But I was very glad to see this. This is a good move by Activision. Of course, it was forced by a number of legal precedents and battles, and I hate that those employees are having to go through it. But I argue this is a big win prior to the Microsoft merger because it sets a precedent, and Activision is still having to clean up its act there. It piggybacks onto a question that Todd Oxford did write in, where he said, with Xbox having over 30 studios once the Activision deal closes, do you think Xbox continue to just let studios have minimal oversight with deadlines seeming to get missed and very few first-party games released thus far? Seems like something has to change. Now, Todd, you're asking one question. I'm equating it to another. And so I'll get to both, I promise. To me, as Microsoft acquires more studios, there does need to be a better job at having oversight so you don't have dates slip. When you look at how Halo Infinite launched, they did a good job getting that game out the door, given where it was. I mean, I've talked to people on the back end. That game was in a bad place. So getting it out the door, great. Some of the delays, news out of the State of Decay developers, which is a story to continue watching, by the way, because you've heard two discussion points on it, and the person that was vilified there in the State of Decay working conditions element has left. And so part of it is like, Activision is a symptom of a bigger industry problem, and Microsoft has been working to address it. Think about the talent they gave up in passing on Moon Studios. Moon Studios would have brought in incredible talent with the Ori developers, and they passed on it because of the studio culture set by the two leaders within that studio. And that to anyone should be a good sign. They're not willing to pick up more baggage in some ways. The counterpoint to that is they're picking up Activision Blizzard, which has a number of legal battles there. I think Microsoft themselves precedent as far as working conditions is a positive one, and this is a good thing for Activision Blizzard and the gaming industry. The more particular question is, do they need more oversight? Yes, they do need more oversight, and Xbox needs to make sure they have the right people in place to do that. I think confidence is a little bit shaken right now in Matt Booty, who has overhead over a couple of the studios there, and then you're hearing about stuff that's weird. Fable kind of having its own rocky stuff, Everwild having rocky stuff, State of Decay having rocky elements. Do we need to have somebody more hands-on to make sure that deadlines are getting hit? There's an argument to be made for yes on a business sense. There's an argument to be pushed back on and saying, hey, we don't want crunch culture. We're all upset that Halo Season 2 hasn't arrived yet, this, that, or the other, but they've openly said developer health is more important to them. And there's a balance there, because if developer health is important, that is more enticing for people and talent to come work for them. Good. If you're missing deadlines, that's not good on a business sense. However, if you control enough studios and IP, all right, there you go. That's a good thing, and people will still flock to your console anyway because you've got enough first-party stuff hitting in full cadence. I think what's happening right now, Todd, and to anybody else kind of in this realm, is you're in the early days of Game Pass. Not to say that it wasn't made 5 years ago, but in what Game Pass is truly going to be, and what these acquisitions are truly going to do with this full cadence of delivery and these family passes and cloud gaming, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're kind of in this new territory where developer health is priority one, hoping to make the best content while you have industry consolidation. And you can look at choices like transitioning to Unreal Engine 5 for a number of their studios. As that goes public now, if you missed that news, that is now a publicly available tool. A lot of talent wants to work with that. Well, if you make your studio culture less crunchy, using more tools that people are comfortable with and happy with, when you've got engines like id Tech, like Slipstream, like Unreal Engine 5, and you bring people in and you don't press them, they want to come work for you, so you bring the best talent in. Again, the counterpoint, the fruits of that labor are not yet seen. Right now, we've got Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite as the two in this generation releases, and they're top-notch games. Like, the gameplay in both, the visuals are both fantastic. But, Halo's light on content, and how long is it going to take to deliver on the best of those engine uses? Well, you haven't had that much. Flip side, you look at Sony, dude, they're producing top-tier games left and right. Days Gone was their mid, right? Days Gone's a good game, but it was their mid. And so there's a lot to be had there. And I think anybody that's hesitant deserves to be hesitant. But no one can argue the value of Game Pass or the direction that Microsoft is going. And picking up an Xbox Series S or X leads you to hundreds of incredible games at your fingertips. So, it's a worthy question to have, Todd, and anyone else that's kind of in that vein. But also equally relevant to say that, hey, strides are being made, efforts being made. You got to respect it where it's happening. I mentioned Halo Season 2 in that discussion, and that leads to a lot of thoughts as Halo Infinite Season 2 launches on May 3rd, day before Star Wars Day. Interesting choice there, but whatever. It's expected to fix a number of different elements of content that people are waiting for with new maps, weapons, weapon balances, modes, which I'm excited for. I just want Battle Royale at this point because I'm just having so much fun in Halo Infinite no build mode. Halo Infinite, haha, Fortnite no build mode. I want something like that for Halo Infinite. But, 3-4 Industry community manager, community director Brian Gerard said that we understand the community. It's simply out of patience. And frankly, I think understandably tired of words. We just need time to get details sorted out, and then we can certainly share as much as possible. End quote. I absolutely agree with him. We are tired of words. It's time to put your money where your mouth is. I jumped in on a couple Halo Infinite here and there for some of the weekly rewards, and then others I was like, meh, not interested. And that's okay. Sometimes there is a pressure that we put on ourselves to only play one game. I've jumped out of Avengers for a little bit and then jumped back in when they had the 2.3 patch. 2.3 patch, by the way, great. Looking good. But I've jumped in and out of games plenty over the last few weeks. My regulars haven't touched Sea of Thieves in a while. In and out of Halo Infinite. Playing a lot of Fortnite now that no build is there. In and out of other games. I don't know. That's fine. You don't need to only play one game. And the pressure to make your game as an everyday thing is not fun. And I don't like that, right? Like I'm actually been pushed away from games if it's my job to play that game, and I don't want that. So, take your time. If a game's not for you right now, I often want to tell this to Avengers players, like, yo, if you're not feeling it, stop playing it. Stop playing it. It's cool. Come back when you're ready. If you're not feeling Halo Infinite right now, come back in Season 2, right? Come back when they got a mode that's there for you or an armor augment that you're interested to. I hear you're going to do a lot more armor customization in Season 2. I've seen a little bit of that, and it looks really good. Like, it's very exciting. I saw some core swaps that they were doing on the back end. That is the benefit, I think, of interviewing lots of people is you get to see stuff, which is cool. You get to find out stuff, which is interesting, and that's kind of cool for sure. The other Halo topic is the Halo show. I haven't talked about it on XEP just yet. That show is decidedly meh. Episode 1 was good, not great, and definitely weird. Episode 2 was an absolute travesty. Episode 2 was hot trash in the summer. I hated episode 2 of the Halo show. I thought it was just awful. And it's weird that it's awful because Pablo Schreiber is good. He's a good actor. Some of the effects are really good. Some of the visuals are really good. Others are really bad. And it's weird. Halsey has a spray tan that is just atrocious. Some of the choices in writing are strange. The helmet being off so often is odd, but different. But Pablo Schreiber himself, good. Some of the outfits look incredible. Others look really cheap. It's just weird. Now, the showrunners for season 1 are already out. So that is good, I think. If they've got a season 2 and they're ditching these guys, good. It needs to go. The writing's all over the place. The acting is all over the place. But I really do like Pablo Schreiber. Like, he's a good Master Chief. They just need to do different things with him. The head nods need to be there. More helmet time. Stop talking about, well, I mean, there's certain like, why is it called Halo at this point? Some of this stuff, they haven't mentioned the word Forerunner. Some of it's just a mess. The nudity in there feels odd. Everyone's talking about Master Cheeks, and that's clever and funny, but like, why is it in there? It just feels strange. The show feels odd, and we thought there was a possibility for Mandalorian level storytelling. Ooh, you're getting one level above CW, and CW is trash writing. It's fun, right? But it's trash writing. Something about Halo feels odd, but I have a lot of hopes for season 2, if that makes sense. I could go way more in depth, and I'll do that on a different episode, I think, when we've got more context, because I want to sit and watch the rest of the season because it's showing promise. Episode 3 shows promise, but I don't want promise. I want delivery. And then I think it's fair to say, it's a fair question, not one I subscribe to as far as a sentiment, but it is a fair question. Like, do the people in charge of Halo Transmedia, does Kiki Wolfkill need to be exited or adjusted in her position? Does Bonnie Ross do these people need to be moved around because the Halo experience across these mediums is not what people want? I don't know the answer to that. I don't subscribe to that answer fully just yet, but we need a Kevin Feige? We need a Dave Favreau. We need a Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni. We need a Feige level presence with Halo as a medium. And I don't know that we have that right now. Someone to say, this is Halo, this is not Halo, this is the plan, this is not the plan, and this is how we're going to do it and execute on it. Maybe that's happening on the back end, but the delivery on the front end is not working. It's not connecting. This feels like the X-Men franchise where it's all over the place, and that's lame and not fair and not fun for fans. So let me know your thoughts, guys. I've talked for a bit. I've rambled a bit. But let me know your thoughts on all of these topics because I am curious, to say the least. Let's knock out a few questions and then get you to that Lorne Lanning interview. Of course, again, I remind you that's the trimmed version. The more extensive one will come out on YouTube, but trimmed is still an hour. So, good stuff, though. Really and truly good stuff in it. Edward Varnell says, do you think if Microsoft fall and holiday releases, along with Nintendo releases, will make it hard to decide what to play or buy? Will it benefit everyone? Good question, Edward. As always, rising tides lift all boats. You got to think that whatever Sony and Nintendo bring to the plate, Microsoft will have had Redfall and they'll have Starfield for the holiday. I'm thinking Redfall is September, based on what I'm bumping into. Redfall is September, but who knows, right? Like everything's changing all around. But Starfield seems set on its date in November, and I think that's going to be a good one. So Microsoft's going to be just fine for this holiday. You got to think that as Forza Horizon's going to have an expansion by then, at least I think it is. Forza Horizon's going to have an extension by then. Halo Season 3 will be out by then. You'll have Starfield, you'll have Redfall. Microsoft's going to be just fine for this holiday, for sure. You got to think also that Gotham Knights is releasing on multiple platforms. Sony, I don't know what they've got for this year because Ragnarok is the one, and it looks like Ragnarok might be pushed. I'm not sure. With Breath of the Wild 2 getting pushed, Nintendo always has something up their sleeve. I mean, they could always just redump some old games onto their system and people will buy it. I do not understand the Nintendo love. Edward, you're part of a cult, and I need you to handle that, my friend. But I love you. I really do love you. You're my friend. I love you. Microsoft's going to be fine. I don't think people are going to have a hard time choosing what to buy. I think they'll kind of be sold, and word of mouth is everything. So it's also a matter of what's available. If PS5s are sold out, people are going to buy Xboxes, right? We'll see how it goes. Samuel Adams from the Exhibition and Xbox podcast, he says, what kind of games are the top of your backlog right now? With big releases out of the way, it seems like it's a perfect time to dig back into some games that might have slipped through the cracks. Great question, Sam. Please answer it as well. Let me know in the comment section or on Twitter what you are diving into with your backlog. When I finished with Lego Star Wars, I'm sitting on Cyberpunk. I do want to play Cyberpunk. I've kind of got that in my back wheelhouse to play for sure. Maybe Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I don't know. That news of the new Tomb Raider from Crystal Dynamics gave me pause. As far as what I know is going on at Crystal Dynamics, remind you we had Brian Wagner on the show a few weeks ago. And then I talked to somebody at Crystal Dynamics separate from Brian that is not an interview public to hear some very interesting stuff going on there. I have curiosity, but that curiosity led me do I feel like playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider? The gameplay is great. Story's weird. So, maybe that one, but definitely Cyberpunk for sure. That is absolutely on my list. And I'm kind of debating what else to do after that. I do want to play Godfall. Again, I haven't bought it. I probably won't buy it yet, but I do want to play Godfall. You know what it is? I'm waiting for that Christmas gift. I'm waiting for somebody to say here's Godfall, go play it. And I'll be like, yay. But I don't want to buy it myself. You guys ever do that where it's if I get this game, I'm playing the mess out of it, but I can't bring myself to play it? That's where I am with Godfall. But yeah, Cyberpunk and Godfall are my two that I really want, I think would answer your question. But I'm enjoying Lego Star Wars. That's where my mind is for a little bit, for sure. Let's see. Sam, Ed, Court, Todd. I think I've answered all of your questions there. Shout out to Game Positive. He was really excited for the Lorne Lanning interview. Shout out to Xbox Mom as well. Always brightening my timeline also. You guys are great. I'll encourage you before we get to this Lorne Lanning interview, please go check out some of the other interviews I've done across the gaming industry. I am so proud of the interviews at XEP. I've been just debating how to get them onto YouTube. Do I keep coupling them with the show, like the regular show with me talking, or do I split them off? But just the voices that I've gotten to share with over the years, all of the Player One podcast, Stephen Frost from Digital Eclipse coming in on the last episode, getting to talk to Brian Wagner from Crystal Dynamics, and even as far back as talking to Gabe Weigel of Gamers Outreach or Steven Spawn of Able Gamers. I mean, I've really just enjoyed interviews for this show. And so if you enjoy them, please go check them out. If you like interviews, please make sure XEP is in your podcast list. Of course, rating it on Spotify and iTunes means the world. My boy Mr. Badbit always talks to me about that, and his show's getting almost 300 for the Trophy Room over on Spotify. I would love to have a fraction of that success. If I have goals of wanting to one day be on Unlocked and stuff, I need to make a bigger splash and help XEP grow. And I do that by way of talking to people and you guys. You guys are the key to all of that. And it means the world that, even 5 people listen, right? Like that means the world. And so thank you all for listening to XEP. Heartfelt. When I take a week off, I get kind messages from you guys. It's just amazing. Well, I think that's going to be it for my portion of the show leading into Lauren's interview. You can find me on Twitter at InsipidGhost. You can email me insipidghost@gmail.com. And of course, the Xbox Expansion Pass on all your podcast services. You're listening to on one of them now. Maybe subscribe in another place too. Enjoy Lorne Lanning's interview here. It'll feel like an episode reset. Enjoy it. Take care, everybody. Yet another week of gaming is upon us and behind us. Welcome to XEP, discussing all things in the gamerverse as they pertain to the Xbox ecosystem. And as I want to do each and every week, I like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made my gaming week better. And this week, the words of kindness are extended to my guest, one of the industry legends, Mr. Lorne Lanning, co-founder of Oddworld Inhabitants. Lorne, how are you?
I'm great, Luke. Thank you for having me on.
I'm ecstatic to have you on. It is a listener requested interview, which makes me that much more excited because I was familiar with you from a number of different projects throughout the gaming industry. And gamers may know you from tentpole titles way back in the PlayStation 1 and PC era through to the Xbox launch title of Munch's Odyssey. And most recently with Oddworld Soulstorm. There are any number of places that people might be familiar with you, but I don't know where to start. I do want to tell listeners that we're not going into everything, and you must check out this incredible 3-hour interview with Lorne from Ars Technica that was just super insightful onto your career. Lorne, how do you prepare for a 3-hour interview? I have to know that.
I don't. People usually send me questions ahead of time, or the Jim, our PR guy, will hand them over. Here's the question. I almost never read them ahead of time. And part of that's just time and pressure. It's like, I'll be okay. And I got too much other shit to do. But the other part is there's something about spontaneity and just the reflection of thought as you realize it. This is just what I feel. So if it was something that was going to grind into technical specs or something like that, I'd really have to review, but history is easy to recall, and moments are easy to recall. So as long as the questions provide the breadcrumbs, I'm happy to chew them up.
Well, breadcrumbs galore, and goodness gracious, looking back, it was just wild to try and track, when you do your research. The first game you launched that I could take was Abe's Odyssey back in 1997. Is that accurate?
That's right.
That is right. And that is
never was on a game development before that. That was the first game I ever worked on.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was your first realm. You had a background that took you through certain military contracts, different types of animation and digital animation. Somehow, some way, if you go quickly, just kind of sum up some of your touchstone projects leading up to Abe's Odyssey. I would love to hear that.
Sure. So I was really sort of a storyteller in search of a medium, and it began with painting, right? Not to go through the whole thing, but it was really, I was interested in incapable photorealism, meaning things that didn't exist, but when you looked at them, you thought they did, that tight. And this was in the 80s. So as technology started progressing, the idea of creating became more than just a camera or pencils and paints, but it became computer graphics. And all of a sudden, it was equally terrifying as it was exciting. and people had been trying to convince me of computers earlier, but it was really seeing that they could reduce scope and reduce effort, reduce time to do things, and most importantly, allow a lot more iterations to get something good. We're in the old mediums, Canvas or something, you can only mess with it so far, and then you ruin the piece. There's no undo. And so into projects, that led me to Hollywood from New York. And arriving in Hollywood, I just got there at this terrible time when all the three of the biggest computer graphics companies in the day in North America were all acquired in kind of a funny Canadian go public story, but it ultimately wound up tanking them all. They all went out of business at the same time, and that was like right a month before I arrived in Hollywood to jump into the business. So it was like, oh my God. And so I went back to school, and that's what led me to aerospace. And I didn't expect this, but I learned something very valuable there. I mean, first of all, I never expected to be getting a call from someone from aerospace, but people didn't know the software of 3D animation, software. And back in that day, and we're talking 88, 89. And so I just get this call. It's like, we heard you know the software. I was like, yeah. And the artist interview really goes into this, but the short of it was that the only place I was living on credit cards at the time, which is just a terrible pattern to be in, and I got this call, and I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, you know this software. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, why don't you get down here? And I was like, okay. And I was literally, living in debt. And that turned me on. It was the TRW Aerospace Visualization Lab. And what they were doing was they were visualizing military space weapon projects that were going on under President Reagan. And I never thought I'd be doing something like that. But but it was basically how pretty can you make this look? I was still just learning the software. And I was like, anything that I had an opportunity to use at that time was extremely expensive machines. They were like 80 grand for the SGI and another 80 grand for the Wavefront software that was running on it, all Unix based. So it was not easy access at that time. And so anything I could do on the machine, I just wanted to look as great as possible. And so then it became like satellites and other, brilliant pebbles and particle weapons and shit like that. And I was like, we can make this look cool, or we can, whatever. And without going into my sort of philosophical struggles, with just the idea of doing things like that. But, that's a granularity we don't need to go into now. But what it taught me was that you could, visualization was extremely powerful, because what we were doing in the aerospace was we were basically making what I called commercials for 5 people, or commercials for 5 generals. And if they understood what it was, then the company TRW might get a literally $1 billion contract or more to build this stuff. And so visualization became a very important thing in technology, because it was allowing really hard concepts to become visible, and not just with paintings and diagrams and storyboards or a narrator speaking over technical documents. It was like, you got to see how it worked. You got to see it. And that I was just looking at aerospace to build a reel, to get a good reel going, because Rhythm and Hughes wouldn't hire me. They were the only company at the time that I was really interested in working with. And I thought they were working on the cool projects and stuff, and had fallen out from Digital Productions and Robert Abel and Associates and Omnibus. For anyone, old timers in the industry will remember all those names. But in learning how you could use imagery to sell bigger projects, and as really this like thirsty wannabe storyteller, I think a lot of that desire was just shaped by life experiences, and then understanding the potential role of the artist, in the modern world and throughout history. Like, where's the real value of what the artist brings? And so I was like, I want to tell stories, and I'm learning about how you can sell bigger projects, and how, a 3-minute video could be worth $1 billion if you had the means to execute on it, the promise of what you were selling. And so when I got to Rhythm and Hues, I always thought, finally, the aerospace work got me a good enough reel, video reel of my work to finally get me a job at Rhythm and Hues, and they had turned me down like 3 times already. And that's just take that into, I'm realizing visualization is very powerful. Becoming a content creator is very powerful. Film is extremely challenging. And then seeing what was happening with video game technology, I realized we could sort of use the projects that we were doing for theme parks and turn that into a business plan to start a video game company. And actually tried to do that, with Rhythm and Hues, I think, but they were just very entrenched, in lots of people and lots of business and television and film, and so I felt like the best way to do it was just to start from scratch, so that from the DNA up, you could start a game company. And at the time, I was writing all these different stories that were turning into just sort of a library of assets, of story pieces, shots, moments, character quirks, just all these different ideas, taking notes and compounding them. And eventually that started shaping into this property that became Oddworld. And after 5 years at Rhythm and Hues, I convinced Sherry McKenna, and Ars Technica really goes into detail on this stuff, but I convinced her to start Oddworld, and that we could do these games, and that the power of the hardware was just getting to the place where we could deliver this sort of higher fidelity rendering, because we wouldn't be doing real-time 3D, which we didn't bother telling the investors and stuff at the time, because I knew everyone wanted to see real-time 3D. But because we understood 3D so well at that time, I knew it was all going to look the same.
Well, okay, so let me pause you there.
Yeah.
Oddworld and Abe, they're tentpole titles and images in the people's mind from all the way back to PlayStation and Xbox. They're critically acclaimed commercial successes, and you're just getting up to that. But when you look now back at that legacy, is it surreal to think about where you were then, as far as having to pitch your own company to make 3D images and take it into the next realm as kind of PlayStation 3DO were coming about? Is it surreal to look back at that legacy?
In some ways, but in ways that might not be expected. Like, it was easier to get money then. Like it was, and as industries mature, it gets harder to get money.
How so? Is this the idea of the smart money and dumb money?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and also opportunity for an industry, and the big shift that PlayStation was bringing, kind of 3DO promised it and PlayStation delivered it, really, right? Was CD-ROM, which meant no longer, 256K of, or 256. A lot of times it was like 256K of memory, or really tiny amounts of memory that cartridge games were using. And I was just blown away at what people were able to do with that within such a tiny amount of memory, turning into really long experiences. Like look at Mario or something. Hundreds of hours people would spend, and but it was all coming off a disc with really limited memory. And so that chemistry just fascinated me. And so at the time, video games, the one thing that the industry knew was that it was all going to go 3D, and games were going to get a lot more expensive, and teams were going to get a lot bigger. And it was going to, as people would talk about it in a day, evolve out of the garage. And it was already past that point, but people would still sort of talk about it in that context. Like EA was already huge, and big companies existed, but it was still like small teams. $1 million titles were really rare, and so we went out and we said, well, let's what do we think it would take? How smart do we think we could be? And how much do we think we could do it for? and we came off with a figure of like, for $3.5 million, we think we can deliver a game. And it, because we had the 3D experience and we had experience in managing large teams, and Sherry was actually legendary in computer graphics in Hollywood when I was nobody. I mean, totally nobody. And so the credibility of, I was bringing the creative and Sherry was bringing the producing, and it was all this history of winning awards and, highest quality graphics. I think Sherry McKenna had the most Clio awards of anyone in the world, personally, which was, the best in annual television commercials. And so Sherry just had this incredible legacy, and I just looked like, maybe a new young guy on fire that just was really passionate about making the shit and had done some pretty good stuff. And in that chemistry, money was coming at us. Few good things come without friction. And so that launched Oddworld, and we moved out of LA up onto the Central Coast of California to join another company that was owned by the same investor that was backing us. And ultimately, together, we were able to get Abe out the door, the first one in '97.
So that was the first one in '97. You followed it up a year later, No Pressure.
Oh my God.
Which is wild when you think about the turnaround time there. Those were tentpole PlayStation titles, and then all of a sudden you're a launch title on the new rival on the block with the first Xbox. Why the transition? Is that an awkward transition? Can you tell me about the decision to make the switch, and did anything not go well there?
A lot of things didn't go well, like when you were asking me, when you go back to the same surreal, it's like so much of it seems the same as today because it's always really hard. It's always, no great products get delivered easily. Let's look at, Tesla or SpaceX, or, how it takes that, or the Olympics, people really going for the gold. It's never easy. Like, no one just says, I showed up at the Olympics, it was happening, I ran a race and I won. It doesn't happen, right? It only happens with people who are training the hardest and working the hardest and really want it and going for it. And I thought the success of the first game of Abe's Odyssey was going to give us a little more cushion, a little more buffer. What I failed to see, to forecast, was that the exact opposite was going to happen. You're now 50% owned by a public company. That public company has annual, quarterly margins it needs to make, profits it needs to make. And we were in a window where some of the biggest titles that were due under the publisher at the time was GT Interactive were slipping the Christmas date. And if you can imagine, this was like, one of them was Epic, with Unreal. And if you can imagine, Epic wasn't even in office yet, right? Like, if you were talking to like Mark Rain and Tim back in that day, one's in this city and the other's in a different city, and GT didn't really, they were like, this company doesn't exist. And it's like, well, they kind of exist, but they work remotely. It was truly a virtual company, way ahead of its time. But we were all struggling to get shit done. And it just so happened that some of the biggest titles slipped for Christmas, but we delivered. And then we had, pretty, we got a home run at Christmas. But the way the board of the publisher looked at it was, what was your biggest performers this Christmas, and who can we rely on next Christmas? I didn't see that coming at all. Like, I thought if we made a game and we had success, we would be afforded a little more confidence and leeway to now build a better game next, like really a better game. And actually, Exodus was a better game. It was. I think the crowd, there's been lots of polls and stuff. But it seems like that was one of the favorites. But because of that pressure was now, put to us of like, you can do it, just deliver the next game in a quintology. And I was thinking more of Soulstorm's story rather than Abe's Exodus story. And so if you think of it reversed like that, you go, I need this is a 3-year production that we're going to enter into. And it was like, yeah, you can get it done by Christmas, whatever you need.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're in that spot. It's like, it's going to cost a lot more. We got to hire a lot of people. No problem. Go for it. You know, it was like, oh shit. And so now if you look at the 2 scripts of each game, I was thinking more along the lines of Soulstorm. Like, really, what is this brew? How is it planting deeper seeds in a more miserable journey for Abe, who's going to bear through it? You know, I really wanted that set up. It wasn't just an IP that was, you know, a comedy, right, or a dark comedy. And so now we only had 9 months, and we had killed ourselves to deliver Abe's Odyssey. I mean, man, we all worked so hard, which was very common in game development, you know. But we just worked so hard, so we were ready for a break, and it didn't come. In fact, now it was the sprint of your life. It was like, oh shit. Now, I guess you could have said no, you know, but you have 50% partners, and it can really,
bills need to be paid and whatnot.
Yeah, and you know, you don't. When the relationship was on such a high, we didn't want to take it low, you know.
Sure.
And so we said we'll do it, and then it was like, shit, how do we do it? And so we were taking the fundamentals of like the brew and the addiction and the this and just, you know, tried to manage. And so I think that's a long-winded answer. Sorry, but to a pretty concise question that you had.
Well, in arriving with the Xbox launch, to make
right.
the jump.
Back to that. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I went down that rabbit hole. So that was, so now we come out of Exodus and PlayStation 2 is starting to ramp in. And it's not out yet, but if you recall, Phil Harrison showed it early and swore it was real, an early demo of Metal Gear Solid 2. And when everyone saw that, we were just blown away. And it was like, how do we get dev stations? We need to be on that. You know, everyone was feverishly trying to get on the PS2. And it was really hard to get dev stations. And they were super expensive. You know, excuse me, I think they were 15 grand or so.
That's a lot for smaller studios for sure, much less big ones.
And then ideally, you know, there's at minimum one in every department, you know, and it was really hard to get them because like the EAs and the big company, Activisions, Ubisoft, they would get us a lot of other developers at the time, Acclaim. They were getting the initial early dev stations because they were going to be delivering huge projects for them, you know, and the hard platform maker wanted those projects. So the thing that we didn't see coming was that I called it a Kudaragiism, which it was. The PlayStation was pretty great. The PlayStation 2 was a strange combination of a series of chips and cell chips and the ways that strange, unseen before ways of synchronizing chips and different types of memory and, you know, a wider circuit board of technology that was communicating to itself. And basically, if you go back at that time, first party Sony didn't release a title on PlayStation 2, if I'm correct, until a year after it released. And there was a reason for that, because that's how damn hard it was to develop for that machine. And the big problem there that the, you know, game players rarely ever get to hear about is that as a game development studio that was independent, you had to raise money to get a project financing. Now you're starting to get into the millions of dollars. But if you're not delivering on time, or if you're going on over budget, that deal gets worse for you with time, because every time you have to go back to the money well, the terms depreciate for you, even though you're going to wind up doing more work. And that's because you couldn't accurately forecast what a budget would be, because you just, it was, no one had deep enough access to really understand how it worked. So you had certain companies like Insomniac, but what mostly comes to mind to me is Naughty Dog, because they had people like Andy Gavin that were just brilliant machine level engineers, right? Like machine level code.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd get in there and they'd start, they were doing on this original PlayStation, and that became part of their backbone. And so they were doing things with Crash Bandicoot other people just couldn't figure out how to do. They were, jockeying around the system. And they were also very close with Sony. So, they got a little more access. And for us, it was very difficult. For many developers, it was very difficult. And we were getting in trouble, and we thought we were going to go out because we couldn't estimate and we couldn't get our hands around how much the title would actually cost. And at times, you had Kutaragi saying things like, "Oh, people say our system is difficult, but that's not a bad thing because it'll just weed out the poor programmers." And it was like, what did he just say? So it was kind of offensive.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't just saying, "Hey, it's a new generation of hardware. We've evolved into new technology, and there's a bit of a hard curve here that we all need to really embrace."
Mm-hmm.
And so it made it way more expensive. And as a leap from that, the Xbox started to emerge, and they were really seizing the opportunity to answer a problem that the industry was having, which was how difficult the development environment was and how much it was escalating the costs of projects. And so Microsoft and Seamus Blackley and Kevin Bacchus and the rest of the guys up there were saying, "Look, why don't we just?" I guess it was Seamus came up with it. "Why don't we just create our own machine?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we take on Sony?" And this became like a big thing. And when the development community was hearing that Microsoft might be building a really solid developer friendly console. Now, at the time, Microsoft had a brand problem in the entertainment space. So there was a lot of skepticism, right? They're like, they make Windows, they don't make movies, they don't make great games. Well, they had a game division that was making great games run by Ed Fries.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing like simulator games, and there's a number of great games came out of there. But the point was the larger entity of Microsoft taking over and coming out with a console. Does that mean it's going to be like a DOS system?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of skepticism, and Microsoft had a lot of brand perception to battle ahead of them, but they knew it, and that was, you were like, well, whoa, you want to do what? And how are you looking at it? And it was
Mm-hmm.
an incredibly huge opportunity to keep your studio alive. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually true. And so we were like, we got to get on the Xbox because, we don't know how long this takes to deliver on the PS2. And if you don't know how the machine really works, how do you really design for it in a way that's going to make the machine shine? So these problems were compounding. Microsoft comes along with a solution, and it's being built by people that had built games. And Ed Fries had a lot of fans in the development community. He just had this kind of incredible. He wanted to back and support games that were really pushing the medium of what games could be, And so, if you go back to that moment in time, not only was it life-saving, but it was really exciting because you saw these. Once you started getting close to the Xbox group, you saw this fierce fight that they were going through inside Microsoft, which is, any big, huge, financially powerful company, comes with, and you want to go suggesting ideas that they should invest billions of dollars into, which is what the Xbox was. That you're going to be challenged. They're going to run you through the ringer just to make sure you're going to pull it off. And so that just meant there was this team of excitement that was kind of like people were migrating from the rest of Microsoft and trying to get into the Xbox group. And oddly enough, you had more of a startup vibe happening with this camp, but that camp of people had direct access to Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. And so, you were building games, and now you're actually 6 degrees separation less, 2 degrees of separation from the richest people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really sort of changing the stakes, and it was really exciting. People were super passionate, and they were fighting for it, and they delivered. And so that was how we got onto the Xbox, without going through the dramas of the publisher acquisitions that were happening, on our home front. Um, it was really kind of a lifesaver for us because of that budget challenge that we were having, which made me a little obnoxiously critical of PS2 at the time. But when you're losing the fight, you lose your cool too. So that's how it was at that time.
It's funny you mentioned acquisitions. You had to contend with that then, the PS2 era, after making 2 hit games and then launching into the Xbox One's launch. And that's a big deal there as well. You mentioned the acquisition elements. It seems to me that acquisitions are coming up more and more of late over the last few years. And it's, you can't, scroll your Twitter timeline without seeing the word acquisition. Does industry consolidation give you pause in any way, and how do you view that, kind of given the flux that your studios have gone through?
I think that anytime you're down to 2 or 3 companies that control an industry, it's a little stifling, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like you have a duopoly or something, or a triopoly, uh, and the industry at that time was two things: it was console games or PC games. That was it. There was no cell phones games back then. No free to play, no social games, social networks weren't even invented yet. And that so today, what constitutes the game industry is, I don't even know how to get my arms around it, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
There's I can't tell you how many times I was surprised to just bump into another mobile company that would be in San Francisco, and it would have 600 employees, and I never even heard of it. But it was a games company. You know, Before that, back in the PlayStation 1 era, you pretty much knew who everyone developing that was putting out good stuff, who they were in the world. The last time I was at E3 in recent history, I think there was 700 mobile games releasing per day on the planet, per
Wow.
day. So, we think we see a lot of games. You're not seeing anything compared to what's releasing, like what's really out there. Medicinal gaming is now emerging. There was announcements that's Mike Wilson and from the game industry, starting up with the medical industry.
It's like gaming
expert mind.
therapy.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
gaming as medicinal therapy, and this is going to be a huge space, gaming as medicinal therapy, because it's already doing it. See, this is what's
Is that
so weird. Yeah, go ahead.
well? No, I'm thinking about the way the Wii and the Kinect kind of made their way into non-hardcore gamer homes.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that Deepwell DTX and this video game therapeutic aspect, that is kind of the next stage of that. People finding a market and wanting to enter it, and they don't need to be the major player, because the name Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, that could be sending some people off of it. So if you've got your treadmill and it's gamified, if you've
Mm-hmm.
got therapy methods and it's gamified, that could be more enticing to the non-gamer. Does that make sense? Does that track?
Sure. And what's happening is it absolutely makes sense. So if you look at like Benny Terry's our partner, and he produced the Soulstorm, and we've been working together for a while. But Benny's he was an Olympian bicyclist, and a lot of his game ideas, they're coming out of what he gets on all the rewards that keep on pushing you to work harder in your workout, right? And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
nah, it needs to be another stimulus hit, because I don't think I'm going to get up that hill unless I know I can get another achievement. So that
Mm-hmm.
the churn of gaming got interpreted by the fitness industry to become more gamified, and it realized people could get healthier, just from that dopamine hit of feeling like you're part of a community, you're excelling in that community, or you're supported by that community, but really you're just practicing on your rowing machine or your bike. You know, there's
Mm-hmm.
something to that. And when it comes to, just to touch on the therapeutic value of gaming, Oddworld had a surprising number, and a lot of companies have experienced this, but a surprising number of players that claim that they didn't do terrible things to themselves, or suicides, or because of the games. And some of these stories went on to national news, for Oddworld.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at it and you go, let me just give you a really grim statistic. One that's not talked about is, England did a study over COVID, and the suicide rate amongst youth was 5 times higher throughout lockdown.
Mm.
But what was also higher throughout lockdown was gaming. Right, gaming exploded with COVID lockdown.
So there'd be a correlation, but perhaps not a causation?
The opposite, which is how many people didn't do that because they still had social connection in a team, in a squad, in a clan. They still were connecting, they were still strategizing, they were still using their mind and socially interacting when a lot of people were denied that.
Interesting.
And so how many lives were saved because of gaming? Now, because of the experiences that we had, like that Ars interview, we'd get into details of specific cases that are just mind-blowing. But we knew, and I felt this, because from day one, I always felt like if you're going to make entertainment, why not try to make it more nutritious? If you were going to make food, why not try to make it more nutritious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just had that kind of philosophy in life of like, games can be a lot of things, but maybe they can be something that makes you feel better, not just because you won, which has value, but because you think about something more contemplative, like a great book or a great movie would give you.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things you can use in life, right? Like deeper contemplation gives you a different reflection and different perspectives, and you can solve problems that way, like life problems. And so just some people, I mean, some people really get massive dopamine hits from gaming. Some people get it from the fame of being like World of Tanks or Warcraft. What level were you? What clan were you? And then they'll show up in forums, and all of a sudden, people are just like, "Oh my God, you're these guys!" And then everyone wants advice, and everyone's what that does for the human psychology, of the person who's getting recognition. If you could buy that in a pill, would you? How did you feel when you won that game? Or how does the gamer feel? And this is one of the reasons we wanted infinite lives. How does the gamer feel if it was hard as hell, and they so wanted to see that next part of the story, and they hate you, the designer, for making it that way? But
Mm-hmm.
when they get it, how happy are they?
Yeah, it's that risk reward, but also the feeling of elation when you succeed. I think you see in a lot of those conversations around the Soulsborne games and recently Elden Ring, and
Totally.
that successful moment of I accomplished this, I conquered that.
If you could buy it in a pill, would you buy it?
I think that's drugs, isn't it? In a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, right?
I wonder if you could comment a bit about subscription services and how that impacts kind of the user experience. And then you guys on the developer side, we have tiered systems like the recently announced changes to PlayStation Plus. You also have Xbox Game Pass and the ability for developers to launch into there at various sizes of games.
Mm-hmm.
Could you comment a bit on how those subscription services are viewed in your eyes as someone who's kind of been there, cutting the deals, jumping systems at various times to make sure the things get done?
Well, it's it's kind of a double-edged sword. Uh, Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example. And it's around Soulstorm. Is we, out of necessity to get the project done, and we were, hitting a number of technical debt, legacy issues, and talent issues, and game industry is emerging fast. Huge companies are paying fortunes. We're just independent, self-finance. It's harder to retain, harder to contract companies. A lot of shifting things in the landscape. Shifting sands, and the Sony was like, "Hey, we, why don't we do a deal?" And I think we were making a PS5, look kind of cool. And they were like, why don't we do a deal? And the way we were working out the intention of a deal was that we would be free for a month on Plus. But we were supposed to deliver in January. So at that time, there wasn't going to be any game machines. I mean, we were like, how many could we possibly sell? No one ever penetrates more than like 10%, 11% on a new launch. Even the most successful titles, you think like, oh, everyone bought this title for that new machine, but then you find out, man, 20% is enormous if someone got that on a new launch for a single title. And then COVID just completely, kicked us in the gut, because we were distributed development across the planet. Now every studio that we're working with is going into lockdown. So now we had, a number of studios in the mix, and now all of a sudden they're all locked down and everyone's working from home, and no one can hand a controller next to them to the other person. That's how you build games, right? So I never would have said, if we said, oh, COVID's going to lock down, you're just going to have to deliver the game, with no one working together. It was like, we can't do that. I never would have said we can do that, but it was forced upon us, and we had to, figure out how to prevail. But that's a long way of saying we needed the money to complete the project, and we thought we did a pretty good deal, because we were like, well, we got this much money, and in January we could. There's no way we'll sell more than this. And that's less than the most we could sell is less than the money we could get. So that seems like good. Let's do the deal. So we did the deal. Now, at no fault to Sony's, just, and then COVID happened, right? This delayed us from January to April. The deal was still for one free month. What we thought was that we might maybe sell like 50,000 units at launch, or maybe 100,000. It was pretty small numbers, because there wasn't going to be a lot of PS5s, and the lockdown had affected. It looked like it was going to affect the number of machines manufactured as well. So there would be shortages at retail, which for our deal would be, kind of a good thing, right? Looking at it selfishly, it would be kind of good, because then there wouldn't be as many game machines out there to get the free game. Mm-hmm. But because it slipped to April, we had the highest downloaded game on PS5, and it was, I think, approaching at the end of the day close to 4 million units or something like that for free, because they were all subscription. And so this was the free game for that month to subscribers. So for us, it was devastating. And so that's how kind of the economies would work. Before you had free months, you might make a deal on a certain number of units at a certain price. You might have, there's different ways to do it, but that's how slipping can really sting the developer, right? No one did a dirty deed. There's no one played unfair pool. Right. This is just, Earth in 2020 and 2021. And so
it's wild to think that getting 4 million versus, couple 100,000, you'd think it's a good thing. Right.
Not when they're free.
But not when they're free. Interesting. Now that's a free service versus like a Game Pass system, which on the outside it's not the same thing on the developer side. Because outside looking in, we hear about different deals that go to different studios. Do you think it would have played similar?
I think, and honestly, I'm not the expert on the nuances between the services. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a lot of the reason why Microsoft was buying so many studios, was because if people were like, wait a minute, we're only selling into Game Pass, mm-hmm. Or like, what does that mean? They don't pay for games anymore. You know, what is the actual behavior of the demographics that's doing it,
Sure.
that's engaged in it? And I think what this is me just projecting. You know, I'm not I'm theorizing because I'm not speaking as a witness, you know, to decisions that were being made.
Sure.
But so in my mind, Microsoft thought if you could get on Game Pass and you're getting special, you know, access to games, then it's more the Netflix model, right? You're not so much paying individually; you're just paying the network. And I think they were thinking about it that way. You know, I think some of the people were, for sure. I can't say that was the decision making, but if you think about Netflix as the future, it kind of makes sense, right? And so, but I think the developers and publishers would look at that more, mostly developers, because the publishers are going to be going, the bigger publishers are going to be going for the AAAs, and they're not going to give shit away. You know, you're going to pay dearly for whatever, you know, Assassin's is going to do or Call of Duty is going to do if you want any kind of exclusivity as a platform, you know.
Right.
But for the smaller developers, there were, you know, and for independent developers, you know, I think of you know, Tim Schafer's company, Double Fine, and you know, others that were acquired in there, right? Similar caliber, like really good companies, but small, crowdfunding, things like this. I think Microsoft knew that if they didn't acquire the companies and provide those development teams, dare I say, maybe a happier life, you know, like we'll buy your company, you guys can get whole and just do your thing and keep building good games. And I honestly think that's a big part of where Phil Spencer's coming from. And I think Phil Spencer and Chris Charla, you know, the roles that they played, I thought that was really interesting for Microsoft because I think they were kind of perfect people for the roles because they really had a lot of experience, and they were not executives that came from other industries and just got into games. They were always games, mostly, you know, almost like hardcore. And Phil Spencer was there on the original Xbox launch, you know, not running it like he is today. But I think that his idea, and I can't say we've talked about it, you know, but I think what his idea was, if we can acquire the developer, give the developer a better life, and you'll never understand how hard it is for a developer until you're a developer. You know, this is just how it is. And if we can give them a better quality of life and they can get whole on their effort from years of work, then they'll, and we allow them to build great games that they want to build, they'll be happier, and they won't be as concerned about how many sales the game is going to do. So that kind of equation got removed through acquisition, I think, with the promise of still, like, you know, like, who wants to tell Tim Schafer what kind of game to build?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Because that's constricting to a very creative mind.
Yeah. Or Brian Fargo, you know, look what they do on their own, you know, like who's going to, you know, there's a number of people that got wrapped up in that acquisition spree. But if you're them, you go, okay, so we can, you know, my kids' colleges are paid for, and I get to make cool games and get paid well. You know, I don't give a shit how many they sell anymore because they're giving them away. I don't think you could get people to be building those qualities of games unless you had an offer like that to entice them to do it. So I guess that's, again, a long answer to it. Sorry, Luke.
It's great. No, I'm enjoying the insight, and I think I'm gonna very bluntly say I'm gonna do a consolidated portion where I split some stuff, and then I'm gonna do the extended one as well and send it to both because it's just really cool stuff. Like, I'm
thanks. That's
very
what
much
Ars Technica did. You know, mine was the first extended one because the editor was like, "We shouldn't cut it." You know?
Yeah,
and then they started their extended series. But I was thrilled with that. Yeah.
Well, you're going to be the first XEP extended interview for sure. There's no doubt about that, because I don't want to cut the content, but I am going to trim it for one of the episodes for sure.
Sure.
So tell me, you know, we've talked about subscription models, and then kind of if you track back a bit, you talked about E3 and kind of the benefits of E3 and getting to see the early ones. The ESA recently canceled E3 officially. We know that we knew they weren't going to do an in-person one this year, COVID related or otherwise. Then there was no mention of a digital one. Writing seemed to be on the wall. They've come out now and said E3 is not happening this year. How does an announcement like that play for you? You were there in the early days, and I talked to Chris Johnson and some of the other people that have been on here. Stephen Frost was on last week, and it's got to be wild.
I was kind of with the E3. I had sort of lost a lot of love for it because I was hearing a lot of the stories about how costly it was becoming and how publishers were feeling gouged on rates, and there was just some things that were going on occasionally that was really, like someone couldn't afford, I don't remember who it was, but someone couldn't afford the floor space, so they figured out they could rent a lot across the street, and then they set that up all legally, and then E3 shut them down.
Like, is that Devolver? That sounds like a Devolver move. I don't know if it was.
Devolver. Never underestimate the cleverness of those guys, right? Devolver. But it might have been, I don't remember exactly. You should have Mike Wilson on sometime. If you haven't had him on. He's got an interesting look on things.
That's a good idea. Writing that one down.
Okay. And so they were doing things, and I think what happened was the E3 parked tractor trailers in front of their parking lot they had rented so no one could see it.
I remember this sound now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was it. I don't remember personalities that were involved, but that type of behavior can lead to people feeling like they're, that it's not I don't know, business is always tough, but that seems a little dirty pool,
Right.
And so I think a lot of companies were starting to pull out, and part of it was positions on. I just knew this from back channel conversations that were happening. Be like, why did so and so publisher just drop out of the ESA, and are they going to be at E3 anymore? Like, those things were connected. So ESA is a big part of what it does. It's a lobby group to Washington D.C. Right, like the fans think about it like it's. I mean, it can be a lot more things. I was close to it with when Douglas Lowenstein was running it, and I was on the board of the AIS, which he was as well. A lot of really cool people. Like, there's a lot of cool people that gaming names that were on that board doing good things. But at that time, the game industry had a big problem with Washington D.C. because Washington D.C. was having it was getting very vocal about games and violence and Tipper Gore, and ratings didn't exist. So the ESA figured out and hired Douglas Lowenstein to run it, that they needed a presence in Washington D.C. and they needed a rating system, because without that, it was like games are coming out like Mortal Kombat and stuff.
I remember that story.
Mortal Kombat became the documentary about all this, but Mortal Kombat, you were pulling out spines and the finishing moves and all that, and just gratuitousness was going through the roof. And now that you could do those kinds of details, gamers wanted to, and gamers wanted it, and so politically, Doug Lowenstein was a lobbyist and kind of a great guy to run it, in my opinion, back then. And so if you understand, the game industry didn't have a rating system, but it was starting to, show pretty violent stuff and sexualized stuff. And then Grand Theft Auto's coming out. Rockstar is starting to emerge, and shortly, around the same time, and just crazy, cool content. And so Washington was seizing that, I think, like they do anything, an opportunity to shake down an industry, and but something happened that kind of destroyed that attack. And I think one of the key elements was, I think like Patty Vines at ESRB played a big role in this history. Douglas Lowenstein played a big role in this history. And what happened was, as violent gaming, totally caught fire, and just the industry was exploding, and all these, approaching billions of people playing, violent crime amongst youth was going down. So if what they were theorizing was true, if what Jack Thompson was theorizing was true, and he lost he was disbarred right after my debate with him. And anyway, if I had something to do with that, wonderful, right? Mm-hmm. But do you remember Jack Thompson? He was trying to sue.
He was the lawyer. He carried around the poster board in the room that one time.
Yeah, he was going around and trying to convince the families of mass shooters that it was the game's fault. Right. So
I do remember that. Yep.
That's what he was trying to do. And but how are you going to hold up that argument that games turning people into psychopaths when psychopathic behavior is going down amongst the key demographic that's playing games? So you got like this. Go ahead, keep selling that shit and see how far it goes, because the data is not on your side.
I often have to explain to parents that every major war in human history on the major epic scales of slaughter took place prior to video games being created. So it wasn't the games that was doing it,
Yeah, Stalin wasn't playing games. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think that was a huge part of what was going on at that time. And I think E3 was also created out of it was created out of ESA, of course, but I think part of that was also the game industry was being treated like second-class citizens at CES in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And so CES was the E3 before E3. Right. Except the game industry was like all in the tents and the parking lots and the car stereos and porn had inside, Mm-hmm. And so as the game industry got more powerful, it created E3, and that was the history of that. But then, we touch on like E3 changed, and LA is the reason why film production is moving all over the world, because LA is a terrible place to shoot. It has all the talent, but they'll ream you for fees and insurance and this and that. And, no one has figured out how to milk the film industry like the city of Los Angeles. Right. That's why all the shit's being shot in, Asia now and wherever, a lot of in Vancouver, all over the world, because they're trying to avoid the reaming of Los Angeles,
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So hopefully that answered that question.
Indeed it does. Indeed it does. Lorne, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I so thoroughly enjoyed hearing the insight and the directions that you're able to take stuff. It was fascinating and educational, and I can't thank you enough. I would be remiss if I didn't invite you and ask you to please let people know where they can check out not just your work, but the games, and they're available in so many places now. Let them know what they can look at, where they can find stuff.
Thanks for that. Well, the recent ones, Soulstorm, the Enhanced Edition, we had some problems at launch for reasons we kind of touched on, but it resolved, as much as we possibly could. And so I think it's come a long way. But that arrived on Xbox. So you have Soulstorm Enhanced Editions there. And then Stranger's Wrath also just released on Xbox. And it's got some nice things going for it. It's the best looking one yet. And then we're on the PS5 store, PS4 store. PS3 is really phasing out, right? But we're on Nintendo, we're on the Switch, we're on Xbox, we're on, what else we're on? We're on Switch, we were on the NVIDIA handheld devices as well. So we're pretty much everywhere. We're on Steam.
Epic.
And I think there's we're on Epic, which is an interesting store, an interesting future, an interesting technology, right? Like Epic, keep your eyes on Epic.
Do you want to elaborate? I invite you to elaborate.
Well, I just think if they see the world differently, and who else can sue Apple and Google and win?
That's a very good way to put it. It is
right?
a very good way to put
it. There you go, right? And if you know these guys, Jay Wilbur and Mark Rain and Tim Sweeney and the other guys, they were just hardcore game developers, man. Just the real deal. And so seeing that they've actually become, kind of a world power in a way, it's just remarkable because they're the same people. So it's just interesting seeing that whole history. Really you'll find it there, and there's some news coming up on Steam soon. So can't wait to announce that. But and of course you can follow Oddworld Inc. on Twitter, or is it Oddworld Inhabitants? I don't know. It's Oddworld. Sorry, it's not right in front of me, and I'm rarely. It's always hotkeyed, right? I'm never having to type it in.
Don't worry, it's Oddworld
Inc. There's Lorne Lanning, my Twitter, and there's Oddworld Inc. Twitter. There's the Facebook group. Official Oddworld, which has a lot of great discussions and stuff. There's the Discord groups, which is Oddworld Discord, and I'm sure I'm missing something, but there's a lot of stuff out there on all the different platforms. Just go to the store, Google it, and search it. Sorry, see how that became a term that stole
it did.
Search?
It did.
Yeah, I'm as gullible as everyone else. All right, Luke. Well, it's been a pleasure being on. I really enjoy your questions, and I look forward to the next time we're able to do this.